In this video, I will examine an alternate approach to teaching literacy and numeracy in primary school, specifically, teaching through board games. As Alicia Clark, an Australian school maths leader and board game enthusiast, states, "It is widely acknowledged and recorded that children learn through play from a very young age. There has been much research about the different types of play and how they support children's development across numerous areas. Concepts such as sensory play, imaginative play, discovery learning, play-based learning, creative play, and cooperative play have been accepted as having valuable roles in developing children's numeracy and literacy skills." But board games? The first images that come to mind may include Scrabble, Battleship, or Monopoly. Though these games are still widely played today, they do not represent the current landscape of board games. Did you know that these games were created in the 1930s, making them over 80 years old? Seeing games like these as the pinnacle of board games is akin to thinking that Space Invaders and Pac-Man represent the best that video games can offer today. Gamers would scoff at the thought. Just as there have been vast developments in the video game world, the same is true for the world of board games. Specifically, in the last 10 years or so, there has been what has been referred to as a board game renaissance, marked by steadily surging sales in board games. And just as there have been video and computer games offering excellent classroom use, the same is true for board and card games, though unfortunately, compared to their younger brother computer games, the educational potential of board games is often overlooked. As Maura Smale states, digital games receive far more mainstream media attention than non-digital games. However, board, card, pen and paper, or dice games can also be used effectively in teaching and learning. A benefit of board games is that they work in any classroom setting, scaling beautifully across ages. Specifically, in primary school, students from pre-kindy to year 6 can benefit from the implementation of board games, though the complexity of games needs to be developmentally appropriate. Additionally, teaching through board games is not dependent on the school setting. It doesn't matter if the school is in the bush, the city, or the suburbs. All students can have access to this exciting form of education, catering for a diverse group of learners. Regarding diversity, board games allow for fun social interaction and competition that isn't relegated to sporting abilities, like running and throwing, providing inclusivity for students who may struggle in these physical ways. And with so many board games not dependent on reading, they can also cater for students who struggle with English, including EALD students. Let's now have a general look at why board games should be used in the classroom, before specifically examining their literacy and numeracy uses. Tom Vassell, a primary school teacher and passionate board gamer, suggests that board gaming in the classroom provides a change of pace, is fun for students, is fun for the teacher, and it can provide an excellent way to teach languages, thinking skills, logic, social skills, and strategy. In addition to all this, supporting my personal philosophy of teaching, board games are extremely hands-on and tactile, and they are steeped in social learning, which all falls under the social constructivism learning theories of Lev Vygotsky. For example, many board games feature the manipulation of pieces requiring spatial awareness and fine motor skills, authentic experiences of using money, dealing with patterns and shapes, and experiences connecting you to or simulating the real world, all of which happen in an environment of social learning. This is a key point as to why board games can be more suited to the classroom than digital games. Let's hear briefly from Paul Anderson, a teacher who implemented digital games into his own classroom to make learning more compelling.
A lot of people think that they can change education by somehow using videos or automating the learning process. That sucks. Who would want to be in a school like that? Kids are coming to school to be social. And so I had to add elements of social learning in my class to make it more compelling.
Digital games in schools are more often than not solitary activities, lacking the social interaction that children crave and that learning theorists suggest are significant for effective education. Like video and computer games, however, board games allow students to be self-navigators for their learning, putting them in control of their own decisions, resulting in effective education. As Jacobs and Alcott state, when students are at the steering wheel and have direct input on the pathway, they do indeed own the learning. Now, let's talk specifically about literacy and numeracy. In recent years, scholars have described gaming as one of the best forms of multimodal literacy. While much of this research has focused on video games, it remains true for board games, where students must navigate written meaning on card games and rules, spoken meaning by other players, visual meaning from the vast array of iconography on board games, audio meaning for games incorporating an audio component, spatial meaning, interpreting the state of progress of the game and its pieces, and gestural meaning, in reading the facial expressions and body language of other players. This links incredibly into the literacy strand of the Australian English curriculum for examining texts in context, interacting with others, and interpreting, analyzing, and evaluating. The language and literature strands of English are also seen throughout board games, with many focusing on vocabulary and reading texts. Tabletop role-playing games are a popular classroom inclusion, where students interact with stories and narrative within the game, often leading them to create their own stories for their characters. As Catherine Beavis states, narrative-based games such as quest-based role-playing games, for example, draw on older traditions of telling and making stories, and build on familiar genres and forms. Players need to know quite a lot about stories and about games in order to play. These kind of games also naturally incorporate a ton of numeracy, whether it's calculating character stats, determining probability, or just subitizing from a simple dice roll. Games incorporating dice rolls or shuffled decks of cards, and there are a lot of those, link in perfectly with the statistics and probability stand of the Australian mathematics curriculum. Aside from simple counting, the number and algebra strand is also addressed in many ways, through estimating and mental maths, working with patterns, and understanding money. As Michael Reardon explains, Monopoly, for instance, requires an understanding of currency, rent, mortgages, borrowing, interest rates, percentage, estimation, and addition. Board games have the power to take the theoretical understanding of mathematics and make it practical. As Reardon continues, students develop their mathematical skills and learn to use maths in real-life situations, whilst at the same time enhancing their abilities to enjoy social interactions. Aside from literacy and numeracy, it is easy to link other general capabilities from the Australian curriculum to playing board games, such as critical and creative thinking and personal and social capability. As Catherine Beavis states, outcomes from playing games include discussing play with friends, working out strategies, reflecting on what happened and why, negotiating for the next turn, and solving problems. There are, however, some obstacles and difficulties when it comes to implementing board gaming in the classroom. As Smale states, a criticism frequently voiced about games-based learning arises from the notion that playing games is strictly a leisure activity, while education is, or should be, serious work. My personal philosophy of teaching disagrees with this criticism, but it's a fair point that some teachers may come across this. Another difficulty of implementing board games in the classroom, as Michael Reardon discusses, is that of time constraints. He states, unfortunately, it is not possible to satisfactorily complete many of these games in a 30-minute or even a 1-hour period. When the teacher calls upon the children to pack up, frustration occurs because the game has not progressed anywhere near far enough to achieve a satisfactory result. Often there may not even be time to calculate the final scores in the rush to pack up and get ready for the next lesson. Again, there's disappointment, which can lead to reluctance to bother to play the game when the opportunity next presents. John Gough adds his thoughts to this topic, stating the following: too hard to learn, too easy to lose the pieces, too much trouble to set up, too time-consuming for the learning that resulted, if any. I argue that while this may be the case for some games, there are many, many board games that can accommodate the classroom setting. You just need to find them. Advocates for classroom board gaming, like Tom Vassell, are helping in this process. His website, gamesandeducation.com, is a treasure trove of resources for finding games that will work well for different subject areas. So while there may be obstacles in implementing board games into classroom teaching, I believe that the vast amounts of educational and social benefits outweigh these difficulties. Relevant to all ages and demographics, board games have a powerful way of engaging students, catering for a diversity of learning styles and backgrounds. Thanks for watching.